History remembers great victories, great kings, great battles. But sometimes the most important moments in history do not happen on battlefields. Sometimes they happen around a table, with ink, paper, and one terrible decision. This is the story of a kingdom that sold land it believed was worthless. Land nobody wanted, land nobody understood, land so forgotten that generations barely remembered it existed. The king who sold it believed he had made a brilliant deal. His advisors celebrated, his treasury recovered, his kingdom survived for a while. But nearly 100 years later, a discovery would force an entire nation to confront a painful truth. The most valuable thing they ever owned was the thing they sold away. The year was 1008-7. King Aldrich ruled a kingdom that was slowly falling apart. Years of war had drained the treasury. Harvests had been poor. Trade was declining. The kingdom's debts continued growing. Every solution required money, and money was the one thing Aldrich no longer possessed. His kingdom was not collapsing, but it was dangerously close. Every decision subtly mattered. Every coin mattered. Every mistake mattered. Unfortunately for Aldrich, desperation has a way of making bad ideas seem reasonable. Far to the north sat a territory few people cared about. It was enormous, larger than several provinces combined, yet almost nobody lived there. The land was cold, remote, difficult to reach. The growing season was short. Roads barely existed. The kingdom earned almost nothing from it. Many people referred to it simply as the empty north. To most citizens, it was little more than a blank space on a map. The territory appeared worthless. No major cities existed there. No famous trade routes crossed it. No valuable farmland covered its landscape. Travelers avoided it whenever possible. Merchants rarely entered it. Even tax collectors complained whenever they were sent there. If someone had asked the average citizen about the region, they would likely have laughed. Why would anyone care about a frozen wilderness? That question would eventually cost the kingdom everything. One winter morning, a delegation arrived from a neighboring kingdom. Their proposal sounded simple. They wanted to buy the empty north. Not lease it, not share it, buy it completely. The offer surprised everyone. Why would anyone spend money on such useless land? Even the king's advisors seemed confused. Some suspected a trap. Others believed the neighboring kingdom was desperate. But as negotiations continued, one thing became clear. The buyers were serious. Very serious. The offer was 500 gold coins. To modern audiences, that number may not sound impressive. But at the time, it represented a fortune. Enough to repair roads, enough to pay soldiers, enough to settle debts, enough to stabilize the kingdom's finances. King Aldrich had not seen that much gold in years. The temptation was overwhelming. Not everyone supported the deal. A few advisors objected. They argued that land should never be sold permanently, especially land that large. Nobody could predict the future. Nobody knew what the region might become, but their warnings were quickly dismissed. The territory produced almost no revenue. It cost more to administer than it generated. From a financial perspective, the sale seemed logical, perhaps even brilliant. The agreement was signed, the gold was exchanged, the territory changed hands, just like that. One signature, one decision, one transaction, and centuries of history quietly shifted direction. The kingdom celebrated. The treasury was replenished. The crisis appeared solved. No one suspected they had just made the most expensive mistake in their nation's history. At first, the sale looked like a complete success. The kingdom paid its debts. Trade stabilized. Infrastructure projects resumed. The army received funding. Confidence returned. People praised the king's wisdom. Songs were written about how Aldrich had saved the nation without raising taxes. His reputation improved dramatically. History appeared to be proving him right. Years passed, then decades. Eventually, King Aldrich died. His son inherited the throne. Then his grandson. Then another generation. The sale faded into memory. Most citizens barely remembered it. The empty North became little more than an old footnote in royal archives. A forgotten deal, a forgotten territory, a forgotten chapter of history. Or so everyone believed. Meanwhile, the land itself remained unchanged, or at least it appeared unchanged. The forests remained dense, the winters remained brutal, the settlements remained small. Few people paid attention. Few people visited. Few people cared. Yet beneath the ground, hidden from human eyes, something extraordinary had been waiting for millions of years. Something that would eventually change everything. Nearly 80 years after the sale, a small group of explorers entered the territory. They were not searching for treasure. They were not searching for wealth. Their mission was relatively ordinary. They wanted to map remote parts of the region. Nothing more. At least, that was the plan. The discovery happened completely by accident. One afternoon, while following a river, an explorer noticed something unusual. The rocks looked different. He collected several samples. At first, nobody thought much about it. But once the samples reached scholars in the capital, curiosity spread quickly. The stones contained traces of a rare mineral. A mineral nobody expected to find in such quantities. More expeditions followed. More samples were collected. More questions were asked. The deeper researchers looked, the more astonishing the evidence became. The territory contained not one deposit, not two, but enormous deposits stretching across vast sections of the region. The scale was almost impossible to believe. The land everyone had dismissed as worthless was sitting on one of the largest mineral reserves ever discovered. Entire fortunes lay hidden beneath its forests. Enough wealth to transform economies, enough wealth to fund armies, enough wealth to build cities, enough wealth to alter the balance of power between kingdoms. Suddenly, everything changed. The empty North was no longer empty. It was priceless. The kingdom that now owned the territory immediately understood the opportunity. Investments poured into the region. Roads were constructed. Settlements expanded. Mines opened. Workers arrived by the thousands. Within a few decades, the territory generated more wealth than entire provinces combined. The transformation was astonishing. Towns appeared where forests once stood. Trade routes expanded. Industries flourished. The region became the economic engine of an emerging power. Every year, the value of the territory increased. Every year, the mistake made by King Aldrich became more obvious. Every year, the regret grew larger. Back in Aldrich's former kingdom, disbelief spread through the royal court. Officials searched archives. They reviewed the original contract. They examined the details. And they reached a painful conclusion. The agreement was completely legal. The land was gone forever. There was no loophole, no technicality, no way to reverse the sale. The greatest opportunity in their history now belonged to someone else. Opinions about Aldrich changed almost overnight. The king, once praised for saving the kingdom, became a symbol of regret. Some called him short-sighted, others called him unlucky. A few defended him. After all, he could not have known what lay beneath the land, but that defense offered little comfort. The results spoke for themselves. History can be cruel. Sometimes leaders make bad decisions despite having good information. Other times, they make reasonable decisions without realizing what they cannot see. King Aldrich had sold the future to solve a problem in the present. And now, generations later, his descendants were paying the price. Yet the story was not over, because the discovery would trigger a political struggle that would last for decades. A struggle fueled by envy, regret, and the impossible dream of getting the land back. For decades, the kingdom tried to ignore what had happened. At first, the discovery seemed distant, painful, but distant. The lost territory belonged to someone else. Nothing could change that, or so people said. But as the years passed, the wealth flowing from the region became impossible to ignore. Every caravan arriving from the north carried valuable minerals. Every new settlement generated more taxes. Every new mine produced more riches. Meanwhile, Aldrich's old kingdom remained trapped in financial struggles. The contrast became unbearable. The wealth seemed endless. New roads connected remote settlements. Bridges crossed. Rivers once considered impassable. Entire towns emerged from wilderness. Merchants became wealthy. Investors became powerful. And the kingdom that owned the territory became richer than anyone had imagined. Many historians would later describe it as one of the greatest economic transformations of the medieval era, all because of land nobody wanted. Ordinary citizens became increasingly angry. Their grandparents had lived through the sale. Their parents had heard stories about it. Now they watched another kingdom grow wealthy from what had once been theirs. People began asking difficult questions. Why had the land been sold? Why had nobody investigated it properly? Why had no one looked beneath the surface? The questions had no satisfying answers. The new king inherited more than a throne. He inherited regret. Every report from the north felt like a reminder. Every shipment of wealth felt like an insult. And every year made the mistake seem larger. Eventually, the temptation became impossible to resist. The kingdom began searching for a way to reclaim the territory, any way. At first, they tried diplomacy. Envoys were sent. Offers were made. Negotiations were proposed. The kingdom suggested buying the land back. The answer came quickly: no. The territory was now far too valuable. No ruler would willingly surrender it, especially not after discovering what lay beneath it. The refusal only deepened resentment. Many citizens believed the land should never have been sold. Others argued the original agreement was unfair. Some even claimed the neighboring kingdom must have known about the minerals beforehand. Whether that was true or not hardly mattered. The belief itself was enough to fuel anger. As tensions grew, both kingdoms strengthened their borders. New fortifications appeared. More soldiers were stationed near frontier regions. Neither side wanted war, but neither side trusted the other. The land had become more than territory. It had become a symbol of wealth, power, and regret. By now, King Aldrich's reputation had transformed completely. History can be merciless. One generation had celebrated him, another blamed him. His portrait remained in royal halls, but people looked at it differently now. Not as the king who saved the treasury, but as the king who sold the future. The Northern Territory continued flourishing. The mines expanded. New industries emerged. Universities opened. Trade exploded. What had once been wilderness became one of the most productive regions in the world. And with every success, the original sale appeared even more unbelievable. Centuries later, historians would revisit the story. Many searched for a villain, someone to blame, someone responsible. But history is rarely that simple. King Aldrich had not sold the territory because he was foolish. He sold it because he faced problems that felt urgent. His kingdom needed money immediately. The future was invisible. The present was not. When people judge the past, they often forget what the people living in that moment could actually see. Aldrich could see debt. He could see economic decline. He could see a kingdom in trouble. What he could not see were the riches buried beneath frozen forests hundreds of miles away. And sometimes, history is shaped by what people cannot see. The true tragedy was not the sale itself. The tragedy was that the kingdom never imagined the land could become anything more. It measured value only by what existed at the time, not by what might exist in the future. That mistake would echo across generations, long after the kings were gone, long after the original contract had faded with age. The territory continued generating wealth. New generations inherited its benefits. New industries emerged. New cities appeared. The decision made in a single afternoon continued shaping lives centuries later. Few choices in history have had consequences that lasted so long. Today, only one thing remains from the original transaction: a piece of paper, a signature, a handful of promises. And a reminder that some decisions become far more important than anyone realizes. At the time, it looked like a routine sale. History would remember it very differently. The kingdom believed it was selling a burden. It believed it was selling wilderness. It believed it was selling land nobody wanted. Instead, it sold opportunity, potential, and a future it could not yet imagine. That is what makes this story so powerful. The greatest mistake was not selling the land. The greatest mistake was assuming they understood its value. History is filled with people who underestimated what they possessed. Kingdoms, empires, governments, and ordinary individuals. Sometimes the most valuable things appear worthless. Sometimes the greatest opportunities hide beneath the surface. And sometimes the future belongs to those who recognize value before everyone else does. If you enjoyed this story, remember that many forgotten chapters of history survive only because people continue telling them. Support the Dustline by subscribing, liking the video, and sharing it with fellow history lovers. Because somewhere in the world, another forgotten story is waiting to be uncovered.